So people can overreact. So it's really just, we've got some information. Let's actually apply some common sense. And again, that risk conversation of what is the real risk, and that's generally how I sort of tackle those things.
You're listening to Protect It All, where Aaron Crow expands the conversation beyond just OT, delving into the interconnected worlds of IT and OT cybersecurity. Get ready for essential strategies and insights. Here's your host, Aaron Crow.
Awesome. Hey, thank you for joining me on another episode of Protect It All podcast. Today, I'm excited to have my guest, Gavin, on the call. So, Gavin, why don't you tell us who you are, a little bit about your background, and we'll roll into this thing, man.
Yeah, as you said, Gavin, thank you for having me. I am a former operator, plant operator. It's not code for vegan. It's just generally someone who works at a factory. Yes, I'm still using that joke. And then from there, I became an industrial automation engineer. And then as a hobby, I studied cybersecurity. So when I went to the UK, everything's just sort of like merged, and then came back to New Zealand. And now I'm just working for myself and been doing that for quite some time. And it's I've got a full origin story of how that all transcribed, if you're keen.
Absolutely, love to hear it. Let's dig in, man.
Well, people tell me I should tell it more often because it's actually quite funny. But so I thought, I'll give it a crack. So as I said, plant operator. For those that don't know what that means, it's you're running around the factory. You're sort of keeping the production going and looking at things. And the really, really good operators, they sort of look at the SCADA screen and then they walk around the plant and go, yes, that reading is what I was seeing at the computer. I didn't do that. I was a pretty terrible operator. I had the idea in my head that I was going into IT. And so instead of doing everything I was supposed to do, I'd be reading books. Looking at the SCADA screen, everything's all good. And then how do you build like a domain controller, and how do you create a file server and what have you? And then I stumbled into cybersecurity as an option. That stage I was already like Microsoft certified professional, and I was studying all this during my off shift, and I really found it fascinating because the concept of cybersecurity was just like brand new. This is like early 2000s, like it wasn't on anyone's real radar. And I just found that this particular book, what it did was, if you had an SSH server, you could connect the host to itself and then fire that protocol down the SSH tunnel and pop up. I was like, why would you do that? And they're like, hackers. If you're using HTTP and you have a username and password, because HTTPS wasn't that common back then. This encapsulates it, so then your tunnel's encrypted, and they can't actually siphon that information off the network. And I thought that was just, absolute magic. Ended up using that several times throughout my control system engineering career, because sometimes you get security controls in place that inhibit your ability as an engineer to do a job. So, being part of the problem, once again, I executed that and did everything you weren't supposed to. So, at that stage, I was, again, studying IT and helping out in the local community, doing remote access and small business stuff, getting their backups and what have you. But what happened was I was changing out a CIP pipe, and a lot of people who probably don't know what that is, it stands for clean in place. Okay, so the particular machine I was working on is a dryer, and it dries stuff, but it's massive. It goes up several stories, and stairs are a nightmare. Didn't like the lift, so I always walked up didn't trust the lift. Built in like 1968, so you're sort of like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm changing out the pipe so we could CIP this thing, clean it. And dryer being a dryer, it gets really, really hot. So it's jacketed, meaning there's thermal protection, but it's still hot to touch. And my boots were worn. Okay, so my PPE equipment basically wasn't up to the task. And I ended up slipping. So that made me fall forward, and I immediately stuck my arm up like that, and my head hit my arm, and my arm went into the dryer. I got a nice burn mark down there. So this is like, oh no, because at that time they were doing a massive revamp on health and safety. You must do this, and here's the safety pyramid, and and you got to remember I was like a teenager in early 20s, so I was literally just did not care. I was like, what is this health and safety thing? They're making far too much noise. The worst kind of person you want as an operator, taking this health and safety not seriously at all. But I blame my impetuous young self, with different ideas. Have definitely changed my ways since then, though. But so with this health and safety stuff, now I've got a burn mark. I've got to go down and fill out a form. And so we get to the form section, and the supervisors, what's happened? Oh, I burnt my arm. And they're like, oh, okay, fill out the form. And it was right on end of shift. And I'm like, it's night shift too, so nobody really around except for the supervisor and a couple of other operators. I'll look at the near miss form, one page, and I'll look at the full health and safety form. And I'm like, yeah, nah, screw that. I'm going to fill out the near miss form. So I filled out the near miss form, and I said, nearly hit head. So that makes it a near miss.
Yep.
Nearly hit head. Got a minor burn. Everything's all good. I wrote a few other things, and then submitted it. Didn't even apply first aid. I just went home, went to sleep. And then a couple of shifts later, come back, day shift this time. And it's like the health and safety officer wants to see you. It's like, oh God, what does he want? I really wasn't enjoying this part of the process. So he pulls me into the office and he goes, oh, I hear you had an accident. I was like, well, it was a near miss. I nearly hit my head. He goes, I see that in the form. He goes, can I just clarify a few things with you? I was like, yeah, sure. What do you want to know? And he goes, right, so you got here, nearly hit head. That's why I assume you think it's a near miss. I'm like, yep. And he goes, so burnt your arm. I was like, yep. He goes, I see there's no first aid record. Did you get first aid? I was like, no. And he goes, this last bit, I just want to make sure it's correct. I was like, okay, yep. Ask away. And he goes, so you wrote, this doesn't really matter anyway. Chicks dig scars. So my arm's okay, and so is my head. Is that 100% correct? I'm like, yep, that's 100% correct. And he was just like, right, let me show you the safety pyramid. Near misses, minor injury, major injury. All leads to a fatality. So you filling out a form wrong is completely incorrect. So I got thrown through the ringer, and then at the end of it, I'm like, oh, okay, I get this now. I understand why this is important and what have you. But driving home from that shift, on the way home, I was sitting there thinking, like, okay, it's health and safety thing. I definitely did the wrong approach around this thing. And everybody's all, regulations and what have you. And then I sort of went back to my cybersecurity stuff that I was currently studying. And I was like, cybersecurity is health and safety for computing devices. And it was just that light bulb moment. But that was 20 years ago. I came to that. So I was like, yeah, cybersecurity is going to be a massive deal once people figure that out. And essentially I thought I'm going to go down the cybersecurity route. Like, that's what I'm going to go do. I'm not just going to do IT. I'm going to go straight for cybersecurity. Well, back in 2003, 2004, no one in New Zealand was doing cybersecurity. There were no firms. There were no things. So that was that career out the window. And fundamentally, the maintenance manager tapped me on the shoulder and say, do you want to work in the industrial automation department? And I was like, I have no idea what that is. He's like, oh, you've been using the HMIs, the PLCs, the SCADA systems, and they look after that. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. And so I became industrial automation engineer, control system engineer. And that was essentially it. I did that for a career, and eventually the cybersecurity stuff, because I already knew like a bit of pen testing and mapping, and, like I said, it was a bit of a hobby. When OT security became a thing, I happened to be in the UK, and my career just took off then. So, the moral of the story is that, chicks do dig scars, because I'm married now. So
that's right.
It worked. No, obviously, yeah, cybersecurity, health and safety, same thing, but for computing devices.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny that you say that again. So my background coming from, operations side as well. I worked in IT but I was working for a power utility asset owner, and I started out in the technology side before cybersecurity was really anything. And I was rolling out operator handhelds, for operators just like yourself, where they would go do those rounds, and they were digitized rounds, and they would scan an RFID tag. We put RFID tags on all the equipment because these were in coal-fired power plants. You can't use barcodes because it's too dirty. So we had to use, intrinsically safe things that, were dust and all of the certification, right? But we were having problems with the rounds not being accurate, and not being used and not getting the benefit out of the rounds. The operator rounds, right? And so one of the things, in addition to upgrading the technology, because the operators were complaining about the technology, I was at a plant and I was just doing a walk down, and one of the operators were showing me, like walking me through a round. So we had one of the handhelds and we were going through and, looking at all the spaces and all the tags were reading and we weren't having any issues. And then we stopped by the break room because it was about lunchtime. So we were sitting there and we were eating lunch. And there were, 10 or 15, in America, we play dominoes a lot of the operators would do that. So the guys are sitting there eating lunch, shooting the shit and playing dominoes. And I seen one of them play a domino, lean back in his chair with a handheld in his hand. And he scanned an RFID tag on the back wall, entered some information and kept playing dominoes. And it caught my eye. I didn't say anything. I just sat there and watched him. He played for a few more minutes. He leaned back, scanned another RFID tag, entered some information, and he did this for 30 minutes. So after he was done, of course, I'm the administrator of the system. I log into the system and look at his round and at the information he put in. He was completing he had a tag. He had recreated every single RFID tag on his route and put a spare right behind him in the break room. So he never had to leave the break room to do his round. And when we asked him about it, very similar to when the health and safety person sat you down and asked you about it, we were talking about it. And his response was, he said the exact thing you did. It doesn't matter anyways. Nobody looks at the data. I can put 9 million degrees and nobody says anything. You're just trying to make sure that I'm working. It's busy work. And then it clicked with me. It was like, wait, it's not a technology problem. They don't see the value in it. So they're not doing it to every one of those guys. And this is back in early 2000s. The good operators are the ones that could walk out and they saw a reading, but they put their hand on the thing and they knew, hey, there's something wrong with this device because they've seen it. They've been doing it for 40 years, all that type of stuff. Right. But it goes into exactly what you're saying is we have to understand, and cyber is that thing. Like, I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people in these spaces where they don't get it. So they find workarounds. Like you said, right? Yes. I'm going to tunnel in. I'm going to plug in a wire around the firewall because I need to do my job and you don't know what I have to do. So I'm just going to tell you, okay, go away. And then I'm going to find a way around it.
Oh, absolutely. The thing with operators is they've got so much spare time in their shift capacity. They can come up with very, very creative ways to get around stuff. Very creative. It reminds me of a guy called Arthur, right? He was in the factory when it was built in like 1958. And he would literally walk around and everyone's sort of scratching their heads going, why is this, pipeline not working properly? Like, it's meant to be the product. And Arthur was, a chain smoker. And, he just like cigarette out of his mouth and just walks up with a hammer and he's like, bang, bang. And then the whole thing kicks off. And you're like, how did you know that? He's like, I've been working here since I was 16 and the dude was like 60, So it's that crazy knowledge of they just know exactly how it just interconnects. Well, that's the thing. Like, operators will do stuff if they don't see the value, they'll definitely go the other way. And I was certainly a case for that. And I've seen it many times since. It's why I always put on the control room desk, I make sure that there is a powered USB plug so that, they're not meant to have laptops, they're not meant to have phones, tablets, but, the game's on this Sunday and they're going to watch it. So they'll smuggle it in, and just having that ability to charge the phone just takes it away. Otherwise, they're plugging into your OT service. And that's that's what's happening.
100%. Well, and from a technology perspective, it's really easy from the outside looking in. This is, I've built teams and brought in, IT people, cybersecurity people from the IT side of the business side. And, they just don't seem to grasp the concept. Well, we'll just force them. We'll reboot them. Like, no, time out. Stop. Like, you're not going to do that. I'm not going to reboot a system that's in the control room that an operator's sitting at, controlling a process without his permission. I'm going to go ask him, is it okay if I use this machine? Like, every single time. I can't just do things to them, because again, they'll kick you out. And that's where, one of the things that you said earlier, right? It's building those credentials and making them trust me. Right. The biggest thing that I have to do when I'm walking into a facility as a cybersecurity person in this place is make sure that they understand, that's why I have hard hats. That's why I wear PPE. It's why I've done all. And I'm not cosplaying. Like, I've worked plenty of outages and done all of these things. I've earned my stripes in that. I want them to understand, not to show off or not to, lift myself up, but more so that I make them feel comfortable that I've been in your shoes. I'm not going to do anything to you. I'm here to help you. And I'm actually the thing that's more on your side than the IT people. I'm going to fight for you and make sure they don't break your shit.
Yeah. That rapport building is huge. And having had that experience, like you say, the PPE and going in and you've had to do things, it really helps. I think the best situation that I've ever had was, OT cybersecurity guys coming to do an audit, consultant, contractor. So everybody's like, don't touch my systems. And then you like lean over and they're having a particular problem. And I'm like, it's your PLC's doing this. And also your ladder logic's really terrible. You should have a code standard, guys. Come on. And they're like, I thought you were the OT cybersecurity guys. Like, yeah, but I used to be a control system engineer. I've programmed that particular brand of PLC like 50,000 times,
Yep.
And then immediately they're like, this guy's all right. He's seen stuff. So they're like, what do you want to know?
Right.
So, yeah, that experience does help.
It's priceless, right? It's one of the reasons why, I worked for big four consulting firms and did this. And it's a reason why they would send me into these places, because, you send some kid straight out of college that's never even seen an OT site or been to a power plant or manufacturing facility or whatever the thing is. They can read that off of them from a mile away, from the shoes that they're wearing to the the way they have their PPE on. You can just tell they don't fit. Like, they're wearing a new suit that they've never put on before, and it's itchy and they're not sure what to do in it. It just exudes from them. I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Yeah. They see like steam leaking from a pipe on site and they're like, is that dangerous? It's like, well, don't go near it. But yeah, no, you're fine. That's why we're in the walk path and not in the hazardous area that has
exactly.
Things like that, what your way around. But I have seen that in both Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, where it's not just big four, just general sort of like IT, MSSPs. They're like, this OT thing's like a thing, and we're going to do it, and we're going to grab some graduates. And I'm like, that business model isn't going to work. And you try to explain it to them, and they're like, that sounds really expensive. We have to get like a really senior OT security guy to come in and do everything. But we just wanted the cookie cutter, like send the graduate and tick, tick, tick. And because it's all easy. It's all Windows XP, right? So it should be easy. And you're like, no, it's not how it works, man. So yeah, I've seen that in the UK, NZ, and Australia. Businesses trying to spool up an OT department, not understanding it, and trying to do that security audit, and then ultimately fail, and then try it 2 or 3 times, and then I've only seen ones that are successful are just pure OT. So it's very, very hard for organizations to have that. It can be done. It's just normally what they've done is they've finally understood the commitment, and they've really gotten someone that is a senior that's been doing this like 10 plus years, just OT cybersecurity straight, that knows NERC SIP and knows 62443 and NIST 882 like off the back of their hand type thing, that can lead the department. Yeah. I don't know if that happens in the US.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's exactly the same, right? And I've seen it everywhere. I've done some work in, Scotland and Ireland and, and power utilities over there. And it's the same thing. Like it's a universal truth of, IT and OT. And one of the things that kind of got us connected was, that IT and OT conversation. And it really leads into this, what we're talking about here is, I've done, again, as an asset owner, when I was in charge of, OT cybersecurity for a power utility in the States here, my CISO hired one of the big four to come in and do an assessment on the IT side. And of course, the big four said, hey, we should do OT as well, like, cause we're here and it's important. And, same thing you just said, right? So they sent these, PwC type folks, big four consultant folks, to power plants, and they wanted to do 45 power plants across all of my environment. And I said the same thing what you just said. You're not touching my stuff. Like, you can tell me what you want to do and I'll get you the data you're looking for, but you're not plugging in anything. You're going to sit in that conference room over there. You tell me what you want. I'll go do it and I'll come back to you and I'll give you your data. And that's what's going to be. And we did that and we were successful with it because I had the credibility and I had built a rapport with all of those plants. Otherwise we wouldn't have gotten anything. Like, they would have just said, there's the parking lot. See you later.
Yeah. That resistance is there. It's been well earned, anything sort of, as we said, you got to have that sort of street cred or rapport to be able to go in and actually get that sort of stuff. But the original reason I contacted you was that colonial pipeline talk with the IT terms, OT, IT. And it's kind of funny because I was sort of on the other side of the foot where I've always explained that, like a domain controller in the OT space is OT. They're like, oh, but it's an IT equipment. It's like, well, yeah, it's an IT function. Sure. Like, a domain controller is a domain controller. He goes, but the difference is you're applying like a different criteria to what you need to do. Like, you don't build a domain controller in a brand new sort of forest tree and have it take over the other one and completely DOS yourself. That's the sort of nuances that you have to sort of go through. And, like network switches, you're like, oh, it's a network switch. I can just update the firmware. And it's like, no, that's connected to a PLC. If you do that, you have loss of visibility. Now, you might be able to do that, but you've got to tell the operator that they've got an outage for like 15 minutes, and you better have a spare sitting ready with the config ready to go to DRAC and chuck in if you need to get things operational very, very quickly. And, again, those slight things, the IT approach versus OT, it's sort of like, you call it OT, even though it's a file server, even though it's a domain controller, even though it's a firewall. It's OT because you're applying a different sort of rigor, standard criteria to it to make sure you think about the consequences of anything you do. And the other thing I try to do is it's specifically for policies, procedures, and that high level governance stuff. Is I generally call out what is IT, what is OT, what is industrial control / industrial automation control systems. Like HMI. HMI can be Windows. It could be Windows embedded where it's firmware that gets updated. You're not probably going to patch that. So if you've got that distinction that a level 2 device could be OT, as in full Windows, or it could be an HMI, you've got to apply different criteria to that.
Yep.
Same with obviously a controller, PLC. Anyone who's updated a PLC firmware knows how interesting that could go. I always like to do it over a dodgy internet connection with low battery on my laptop just to make it extra fun.
On a Friday evening also.
On a Friday evening, that's right. Yeah, just to make sure. But yeah, so having those terminologies like IT, OT, ICS, and what constitutes, and even mapping it to the Purdue model. And I know a lot of people are like, Purdue model's dead. Everybody seems to teach it. So having that sort of terminology, seen as it's permeated across, like it's within our space all the time. People talk about it. It just helps facilitate the understanding, and then you can actually have better conversations. So yeah, I find that the terminology seems to always jump around. Doesn't matter what organization you go with, and the rule of thumb is you always adapt to the organization's way of calling it. But those terms are important. But ultimately, your conclusion was it's all operational risk. And that's in your previous talk, and that's completely right. That's what I've seen as well. It doesn't matter if, the executive board or the company does not care that it's OT specific risk. It's just risk.
Did it impact my site?
Yes, that's it. that's all there.
Was it the trash can, the parking lot? Was it the janitor? I don't care what happened. How do we make sure it doesn't happen again and make sure that, we can continue doing business? Are we safe to start back up and start producing whatever we produce again?
That's it. Yeah. And it's always interesting having people that don't grasp that concept, where sometimes you just got to look at them and go, well, what's your interest of saying this isn't an OT attack, or an OT impact? And generally it's because they're trying to sell a report or, write a blog post. I found there's this, if you just pull apart a few threads, you can actually find the motivation of why they're saying it's OT or not OT. But yeah, end of the day, it's operational risk. So the terms matter, but all we're doing with is facilitating risk. And if you go to a board and say, here's your risks, and they're like, we accept 90% of them, it's like, well, I've done my job. It's documented. They've accepted. All right, cool. Out. It's really painful as a consultant, and people that, as you and I have both worked in these environments where you want to protect them. But when you've got an organization that's like, yeah, no, we're good. It's like, well, what do you do? You can't do anything. You've informed them and they've accepted it. So just have to move on.
I'm sure it's like a mechanic. Everybody. I'm sure it's like a mechanic when you bring in, when somebody brings in a car and the brakes are shot and their tires are bald and, they don't have any power steering fluid but they don't have any money either. They're like, all these things are broken. You really shouldn't drive it. And they're like, I'm good. I'll take the risk. Okay. But I don't think you should. But
that's a good analogy.
It's frustrating to me because, again, I've worked I've been an asset owner. I was a CTO of a software company and, providing a product in this space. I've been a consultant at Big Four and, now I'm at a different consulting company. So I've been in all of those seats. And for me, I want to help people to understand where they're at. To your point, right? You look at the frameworks, whether it's NIST, CSF, whether it's, 853, 882, 62443, all these different standards. It doesn't matter. And the way I've always looked at these standards is it is the language that we're going to use to be able to make sure that you and I are communicating the same thing. What is the risk? What is the definition? Where is the gray area? Who is responsible? Because when I'm, to your point, if I'm going to present these risks, and many times the boards or these plant managers or whomever, they're accepting the risk. I sometimes believe they don't really understand the risk that they're accepting, because if they did, it's kind of like the car analogy I was just saying. You're going to lose a tire and you're going to die in a fiery ball of fire a mile down the road. You're not going to accept that if you have a baby in the back seat. But if you're a 19-year-old kid and you full of piss and vinegar, yeah, you're probably going to take that risk and drive on down the road. We all made stupid mistakes in our teens, right?
Yes. Mine is definitely my operator career. I think I highlighted that at the start.
That's right.
The car analogy I've always used when trying to get my point across for me is generally it's like I'm the world's safest driver, and they're like, what are you talking about? It's like, world's safest driver. I've never been in a car accident. Ergo, world's safest driver. And it's like, oh, well, there's other factors involved. It's like, oh, is there? So, and then they're like, oh, I see what you're trying to say. So it helps, generate the cogs turning to get the conversation across and get the value. But jumping back to standards and frameworks and what have you, I generally like to do 62443 purely because people are like, okay, well, what happens if you leave? You're like Uber consultant, you can do all these things, former control system engineer. You perish, you move away, whatever happens. How do we know that what you've done is good, or how do we continue it? It's like, well, you can do the training. It's online. There's an official process and structure in place for you to pick up and go. So I know a lot of people, ironically enough, still use NIST controls. So you do the 62443 process, but you don't do 3-3. You actually end up doing NIST 882 controls, and that's fine. All you're doing is mapping controls to security levels. And so as long as you know that's what you're doing, there's, again, that structure, that conversation, that terminology all comes in, and everybody's now communicating effectively because they're all saying the same thing, and it all means they know what you mean when you say stuff. So yeah, that's my take on it anyway, and that's why I like 62443, because it's just the training.
It's amazing because in OT, we do things so differently. Again, coming from the operations side, we use phonetic alphabet, right? We use three-way communication. We use stop when unsure. Like, we do all of these things because of the whole safety culture. So we do these things inherently. Our IT brethren don't necessarily do those things. Like, they're not doing safety moments before they, run a patch on a Windows server, right? They're not doing a job safe briefing. They're not doing lockout, tag out, when they're unplugging a server, right? They're just not doing those things because the risks are different. I'm not saying we're better. I'm not saying that they should do all of those things. I'm just saying we look at things because, coming from a plant environment, we look at things because people die, like, literally, no exaggeration. I've been on an outage when multiple people have died for different reasons. Doing an outage, they did all the safety stuff and they still passed away, right? It's awful. Nobody likes it. And it's horrible to see. Those people didn't go home to their families, right? No. These are dire consequences we're talking about. Like, we're not talking just bits and bytes and email and, can't get to, Facebook or watch the football game. We're talking about somebody's father didn't come home. Like, these are big deals that we're talking about.
Yeah, that's the thing. The stakes are higher, if you will, people who have actually experienced a death on site knows that it's very eerie. Like, the tone and the mood just changes almost instantly. It's very, very bleak, and like you say, it could be someone's father, mother, brother, sister that's not going home that day, and yeah, so we do take that really seriously, especially those that have, trained in like functional safety, machine safety. So I did machine safety, and not as sexy as process safety. Machine safety is like put a gate around it, de-energize stuff.
That's right.
It's relatively simple, stuff. But it is interesting talking to another sort of control system engineer, cybersecurity pen tester. So electrician, engineer. Got into cybersecurity, pen test, consultant, right? He said, like, you always seem to say, he goes, and it seems to be like a functional safety thing. Everyone in that space seems to always bring up like safe, reliable operations or safe, reliable productivity. And it's like, yeah, well, that's what you need as a foundation. And he had never done machine safety or functional safety. So he never he's still safety conscious. But it is interesting when you go down that path of actually HAZOPing and JAZOP and, LOPA, going through that process, like really digging into what is the risks, then coming from that sort of engineering side and then going, what are the risks from cybersecurity? I don't know, I guess you're more tuned to it because you've had that exposure. And so you see the potentials for more hazards, I guess. But yeah. Well, I don't know. Have you?
Go ahead.
Sorry. Oh no, I was just going to say, did you ever do machine safety, functional safety at all? Or
oh yes, yeah, for sure. Yeah. And it's so funny because, or not funny, but we just look at things. It changed my perspective on absolutely everything, right? Even going into, I do assessments on, enterprise environments and all that kind of thing. And I look at things differently because of the things that I saw in that space. And I'm not just talking about the deaths and that kind of stuff, because obviously that didn't happen all that often. But still, just the possible, once you understand that light switch is like, I remember seeing a safety video, because again, I worked in power utility. So we're working with these giant, high voltage devices, and we had to, wear arc flash protector. And when, they have these machines that would rack in these big relays, and they would make us watch these safety videos. Because the equipment that you have to put on, like it's like a full hazmat suit, and it's big and bulky. It looks like something like the dog people wear, when the dogs are attacking them, like super protecting this big shield. But then when you see an arc flash and you see what happens, it's terrifying. And I'm not recommending you go look, but if you're interested, go Google that. It's disgusting and not something it's very fun to see, but it literally vaporizes people. like nothing left. And it's terrifying, and it happens in a split second because they had a metal ring on their finger, or their screwdriver, crossed a bar or something. Like something happened and they're gone. Like there's no existence left. They're just burns the skin, like their clothes onto them. Like it's just really bad. So when you see that type of stuff, you look at things differently. You're approaching risk in a different way than something that is just, again, an email server going down. So when I'm looking at an assessment and I'm looking at IT versus OT, which is why I get so passionate, so frustrated when say, oh, well, that wasn't even an OT attack. I don't care. Like, I don't care where it started. I don't care that it was an IT. I care if it can impact this site, then it's an OT attack. Plain and simple, right? It didn't come in from OT. It wasn't focused in OT, but it impacted OT. It impacted my plant process. It impacted the potential safety and viability of this facility. That's an issue. And the fact that you're arguing over whether it was IT or OT, you're missing the forest for the trees, buddy.
Yeah, no, I concur. The reality is if you've got operators that are not making productive material, whether that is clean water or treating water or electricity or an iPhone, then you're not producing. If you're not producing, that's an operational impact. So, speaking of, the arc flash and stuff, ring hand, and this is my wife's okay with it, but it's just
mine's silicone.
There you go. It's just one of those things where you've seen it, like injuries happen in the workplace, and you're like, yeah, no, it's not worth the risk of, Interestingly enough, the arc flash suit, I was still an engineer when that sort of really came through in New Zealand, and the movie Hurt Locker came out at the exact same time.
Yeah, it looks like that.
So, yeah. So we always refer to it as the Hurt Locker suit. And Suit Up, because I think I forgot the TV show that was off, but Suit Up meant Hurt Locker suit.
Yeah.
So yeah. So,
it really gets back to when you're looking at these frameworks and you're looking at all these things. For me, when people are talking about, it doesn't matter if you're wastewater, if you're, small manufacturing, big manufacturing, electricity, it doesn't matter. You're all doing something, and it's using, OT as physical processes. It's really about defining it. And unfortunately, what I see too many times is when I walk into these places, there's a lot of gray area. There's a lot of assumptions, and there's a lot of unknowns. IT has a good understanding of their stuff to a certain point, and then OT operations has an understanding of their stuff to a certain point. Usually there's a lot of gray in the middle that nobody really knows who owns and who supports and whose responsibility it is. And sometimes it's IT. You mentioned it earlier. IT supports the switches. They support the firewalls. They support the Active Directory, maybe, some of those types of things. Those are IT type systems, but we've got to get out of the mindset of, to your point, and what I talked about before on that other example in my other episode, Active Directory, if it is serving a function in OT, it is an OT system every single time. It's why I don't commingle Active Directory with IT and OT systems. It's just, I don't do that. Firewalls, same thing. Switches, same thing. VMware, backups, you name it. It doesn't matter if it's an IT type product. It matters what it's doing. What function is it serving? And is it serving an OT function, an OT system? Then it becomes part of that system.
Yep. Completely agree. Where I've seen, definitely if you can, like obviously Active Directory separation, where you have like IT like looking after all the things. Generally, what happens in that scenario is it's an education piece and awareness piece saying, stop updating those network switches. You're going to upset operations, and and that's why our IT department tends to have a bad reputation from that. But there are a lot of places, and one of the fortunate things was, I've come from water and waste and manufacturing or food and beverage and what have you. And I've also was fortunate enough when I got back to New Zealand to go into oil and gas. And one of the things that really struck me was like, wow, you guys have budgets for firewalls? Like genuine, it's a line item. Right. I was like, I have to fight tooth and nail just to get a firewall in, in a water treatment facility. And the parallels are just so worlds apart. So I've really been fortunate enough to learn what you can do with less, and that can also help generate value a lot sooner. The reason I bring that up is there's a lot of factories out there. There's a lot of operations, if you will, where you don't even have engineers. You've got industrial electricians and instrument techs, and they are looking after the equipment. They can't even get an OT guy in. So yes, IT is facilitating the OT Active Directory and the OT network switches. And realistically, it's just trying to give them the best tool set and awareness, and so that they keep operations running. I mean, every assessment I've gone to, you come up with risk scenarios, and it's like, okay, have you ever heard of Nessuscan? It's like, oh boy, we have in OT. IT's taken us down 4 times this year. And you're like, okay, well, that's a risk scenario, right? Every time there's something like that, or a firmware update, someone just updated the hypervisors, and it's like, oh, but it's standard procedure. And once again, they haven't taken it into account. So in those really like places where you've got like electricians doing a really good job, but they're doing controls even though they're not fully engineers, and they're maintaining the electrical instrumentation, all that stuff, and they're expected to know TCP/IP networking and Active Directory, and it's a lot. So making sure that the IT guys can facilitate and help is a big deal. When you get to like oil and gas, energy, generally there's a full OT team. So there's like engineers, and then there's like an OT team up to like helping with Active Directory and all those things, firewall rules, and you can afford switches and firewalls. It's great. So.
And tools and process and training and all that fun stuff. But to your point, like for me, it's always been, it's been, training, right? And when I started this out, again, I was an asset owner, and OT didn't exist. Like that term wasn't even a thing, especially OT cybersecurity. So I was recruiting people that had a skill set like mine, but there aren't very many people like me and you. And, there are some of us out there, but there's not that many people that have an operations background, came from working in manufacturing or in a plant environment or whatever that environment is, and also has the technology side of things too, and kind of gets both of those worlds. So I was recruiting a lot from, IT, had never been in a plant of any kind whatsoever. But they had the technical chops. They were network admins, or they were Active Directory, or, all that kind of stuff. And then I was also recruiting from operators, right? I would get operators from plants. This guy's been there. One of the guys that I hired, one of the best, became one of the best OT guys that I had. He'd been a plant operator and an INC technician, and, instrumentation and controls was the title. And he'd been an INC guy for 30 years. And worked in all these power plants. So he knew every person. He knew every system. He knew how all the control systems work. He programmed every PLC. He'd done absolutely everything in all these spaces. So he got his instant credibility. And he also was a great, as we're running, hey, we want to do this, this, and this. And he'd be like, this is the resistance you're going to get, and this is how we can talk to them and do it in a safe way they may be okay with, right? And that was priceless to us. So my pitch to anyone listening to this, if you have IT providing services to these things, either get an operations person on your team to help you with that, or send your IT team to the sites that they're actually supporting and make them work an outage. And then they'll have a better understanding of why these guys are so hesitant for you to make changes at Friday night with your low internet connection as you're upgrading the firmware.
Yep. No, I completely agree with that. In fact, I had one guy that, same deal. Cybersecurity is like, I've been doing this OT thing for a while, but I've now gone to this energy company. I've done a little bit of energy, but I don't know what to do. It's like, okay, there will be, like a shutdown for a substation. Yep. Make sure you're part of that team and learn how to bring a substation back online and into production. And I was like, the value you'll get from that would be outstanding. And he took that on board, and that's exactly what he did. And he's like, I've got such a better understanding of what goes on now and why, and that's the thing. But every time you grab like an IT guy and go, you're coming to the OT team, I've always noticed like after a while, their eyes just light up. They're like, oh man, this is cool. Like, you're explaining like a process, like, oh yeah, that machine, that feeds the retroencapsulator, and that kickstarts the flux capacitor, and they're like, oh man, that process is amazing. Like, I've been stuck in IT all these years, and you had all this cool stuff sitting here. It's like, yeah. So yeah, I've seen that, and obviously massive uptick I've noticed in the past 3-4 years. Electricians, instrument techs, control system engineers wanting to do cybersecurity. It's actually jumping, and as you say, those guys are usually really, really effective, especially in their home turf. And it's definitely either option, having both come in and have them teach themselves. So you've got the IT guy and the controls guy teaching controls to the IT guy teaching, like networking and Active Directory. Really, really does help having that cross-pollination of training, I suppose. So
yeah, 100%. I mean, it's priceless. It's really the only way to do it, right? And I made different process. We did things differently in the OT side than we did in the IT side. I would always tell. In fact, I had an IT guy come to my team, and he rebooted a machine at a power plant from 4 hours away, and on a Friday afternoon. And my punishment was I told him, like, get in your car, drive to that plant.
Yep.
He goes, well, it came back up. I'm like, get in the car, drive to that plant, walk up to that operator, explain to him what you did and why you did it. And you're going to sit there and make sure everything is okay. Well, it's probably going to be fine. Yeah. But you're going to go make that, because if you don't, we've burned a bridge and they're never going to let us touch their stuff again. Like, you have to eat crow. It's not even, a pun, but you have to go put your hat in your hand and say, I'm sorry, I did this to you instead of with you. And once I started kind of building that camaraderie with him and the team, to your point, the lights came on and he understood it. To your point, on the other side, the electrical, the electricians and the instrumentation guys and the operators, these guys are super capable. They're very technically smart. They're managing these systems. They're programming these PLCs. They're doing networking. They may not even understand exactly how they make it work, but they can. They're very capable. They just don't have an IT background. No different than you or I. If we had no training and they throw us into an operations space, how would we expect to be successful? Right? It doesn't mean we're not capable of learning it. It's just not something we've experienced before. So use that to your advantage. We're all one team. And that's the biggest thing that I try to tell people is we've got to remember, it's like a husband and wife. If you're arguing about something, remember, we're on the same team here. We're trying to get to the same place. We're trying to raise kids. We're trying to pay our bills. We're trying to get along and have fun and, build a cool life. We may have different directions or ideas on how we get there, but we're still going the same direction. So let's try to find a compromise, one that we can both agree with, and go with that. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Effective communication and reiterating that we're all on the same side and we're all trying to, do the same thing. Even with, so I worked for an OT network intrusion detection system company, and it didn't matter what shirt you were wearing, where it was yellow, pink, green, blue, red. It's like, look, we're all competitors. At the end of the day, we're trying to protect critical infrastructure, so we can just let that go and just get on with it. It's like, yes, you won that client, and we really wanted to win it, but we're here to help.
Exactly.
And it's just one of those things where I think the community can do quite well when they're all on the same page and everybody's working to the same objectives. But sometimes people can get a little emotional. As engineers, as operations, you can get a bit precious about your plant, rightly so.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you just got to sort of like, oh, hound, let's just, right, what are you trying to achieve? Okay, I can help facilitate that. And that's probably the best objectives outcomes you can get from it. Yeah.
So we have very similar backgrounds and experiences and all the different things, obviously in different ponds, but it's really no different. I guarantee if I walked into a power plant in New Zealand or Scotland or any place else, they're pretty much the same. Their accent's a little different than my East Texas accent, but that's okay. But how do you differentiate, and how do you, because every vendor, every news article, everything is like fear, the sky's falling, Russia's going to hack us, all the FUD that comes out about all of this. Again, I was an asset owner. I was also a CTO selling a product. So obviously marketing, and we're trying to convince you to get our thing. But how do we get through that and narrow those things down to, you can't say that, you used your analogy earlier, and I've heard it 1,000 times. Well, we've been running this power plant for 40 years. And it's never been hacked. Why would it be hacked now?
Yeah. There's definitely there's a vested interest in bad actors, if you will, that want to, and you got problems with, like, as you say, FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt being thrown at you constantly, and people get pretty, thick-skinned with it. They're like, we hear this every week. What do we do? I think generally having a pragmatic approach and saying to them, look, not everything's a risk, but some things are, and you do need to take this seriously. I remember it was very, very long ago now, 2017. CISO. Sorry, we call it CISO here. I just found out that
we call them CISOs. That's weird. You probably call it a bonnet too, don't you?
Probably. Yeah, it's a New Zealand thing. I always thought the rest of the world called them CISOs, and it's like, no, the rest of the world calls them CISOs. You're the ones that are weird. It's like, okay. So CISO was like, no, there's a vendor, OT vendor, their firewalls and switches, like there's like 20 CVEs read 999.99. It's just doom and gloom. It goes, you must patch now. Like this is a problem because some of the firewalls are the gateway between IT and OT. And I was like, I sent an email back saying, no, we don't have to patch. And here's why. We're not IT, so we don't expose the management interface to just anyone. Like you actually have to be on plant. And it was one of those plants that didn't allow remote access. This was before COVID when, that was almost standard practice.
Standard operating procedure, yeah.
Yep. So in order for you to actually access the firewalls and the network switches, the management interface, you had to get into site and then log in. If you got into the OT network or ICS network or whatever, it's not the CVEs that are going to be a problem. It's the username admin, password admin that is everywhere. That's the risk. So no, we don't have to do the CVE patching, and that's that news bulletin, CISO overreacts, as you do, and just having the credibility and the ability to just actually look at it. I mean, that's why you have that risk-based approach to vulnerability management. I think that DHS, that flowchart that DHS did years ago, which is still great. That type of thing. It's just, okay, we've got these threat actors coming at us. It's like, I heard people when Russia invaded Ukraine, they're like, right, Russia has invaded Ukraine. We are air gapping our OT environment. You're like, okay, that's a fair move.
Sure.
But for how long? Like,
right.
Are you pulling that cable just to go, all right, where are we? Like, do we need to look at something? Are we being targeted? Like, okay, but are you going to be air gapped for the next 50 years? Like, what's the end goal here? So people can overreact. So it's really just, we've got some information. Let's actually apply some common sense. And again, that risk conversation of what is the real risk, and that's generally how I sort of tackle those things. But as for like the specific, we're not a threat. It's like, well, my government and probably yours has been saying for quite some few decades now, it's like, yes, we are targets, and yes, they are coming for these things. And much like the, I'm the world's safest driver analogy, it's like that's generally helps get the ball rolling. What's your approach to the FUD?
Same thing, right? And I usually come back to, unfortunately, I don't believe that, especially at the board of directors level, the CISO level, they truly understand the risk, especially in this OT space. I think they do a better job of understanding the IT space, probably because most of those CISO type folks came from that business and that world. So they have a better way to grasp the risks and the understanding of, Active Directory and Exchange and cloud and all that kind of stuff. But they don't truly understand the OT space. So when we're talking about risks in these spaces, and we're talking about Windows XP, and we're talking about, unsecure protocols and admin and not patching and all this type of stuff, it sends their spidey senses off, because it goes against everything, their entire playbook that they do in the IT space. And they judge it based upon the same device in an IT space, because it's, in a DMZ that's accessible by the internet. And I've got, third party contractors that are logging into it, and they don't understand. And again, it goes back to kind of like what I said before. the best way I do this is I take people to those places. Like, okay, the only way you can get to this control system is if you're sitting in this room and there's only 10 people that have access to this room and they've all worked here for 5+ years. They all know each other. They're on the same softball team together. So if you walk into this room and they don't know who you are and you sit down at that chair, they're going to tackle you.
Yeah.
No questions asked. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're the CISO, if you're the CEO, you don't need to be sitting in that seat and you are not authorized to be there, and they're going to stop you. And it happens. Like, it's just part of it. Right. And they don't grasp that there's other mitigating factors that go into these things beyond just patching and secure remote access and firewalls, and all those things are good. And we absolutely need to do all of those things, but it's not the same in an IT space as it is an OT space. And once you understand that, and the only way to grasp that from my perspective, or the best way, it's like, me trying to explain to my 16-year-old life lessons that I learned on why he doesn't need to do something or why he should do something, right? If he hasn't experienced it, it's just like, yeah, dad's old. He didn't know what the hell he's talking about, right? Versus when he's done it himself and he hits his head against the wall, it's like, oh shit, that hurt. Maybe I shouldn't do that again.
Yep. The conversations with the executives, they really don't care that no, this is OT risk and OT is different. It's just, I find you've just got to channel it to a sense where it's like, well, no, actually, we have compensating controls. It's not just fix the problem. There are other mitigating circumstances. So let's look at credibility. Let's look at target attractiveness. Let's look at exposure. And then, and those words they can generally pick up and go, okay. So it's like, well, as we go down, that sort of means that these things just drop off and that risk is actually quite low. And that generally has a more facilitating things. I previously tried to go, no, OT is different, and OT, you do this, this, and this, and this is why. And it's just their eyes glaze over. They're like, no, it's the domain controller, so IT stuff, do IT things. Like, oh.
Same thing. Same.
So, yeah. different countries, same problems.
It's universal. Like, it really is. I've talked to people on this. I had Peter Jackson from New Zealand, one of your Kiwi buddies, the other day on here. And I talked to people, like I said, Scottish Electric and in London and in the Middle East. And I had somebody from Saudi Arabia on the other day. And, it's the same everywhere we go. This is a common use case. And part, it really goes to the overall design. Like, our systems in OT were designed to run for 40 years, right? We aren't upgrading them every year. We're not trying to get the newfangled technology. It's the same reason why, ironically, we buy, at least in the United States, I don't know how bad it is there, but here, every time a new iPhone comes out, you have to get the new iPhone, right? It may not have any much difference. It looks the same. If you put two of them next to each other, you probably can't tell them a difference. Like, maybe the camera's a little bit better. Maybe it's got a little bit faster processor, and it's another, $500 more expensive than the last one, right? I got to buy a new case, all that kind of stuff, right? But the 4-year-old version of the iPhone is more than I really need. It works just fine. My kids use it. It takes great pictures. It does everything they need it to do. OT is more like that. Like, it's more like my grandparents that lived through the Great Depression in the United States, that they never threw anything away. They repaired stuff. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? I'm not going to replace it with a new iPhone because mine's working fine. Like, I'm not going to rip out my control system and upgrade it from Windows XP to Windows 11. Yes, I can't patch Windows XP, but you know what? It's stable, and it doesn't have to connect to the internet, and it doesn't have to be on a cloud. And there's all those other problems that you bring in that, yes, you're solving one problem and you're bringing in 12 more. And that's the thing that we sometimes miss in these discussions is, you're forgetting all the new problems you're adding by trying to solve one. You're adding 12, and those 12 are way worse than the one, because I can mitigate that other one a hell of a lot easier than I can those 12 that you just brought in and I can't do anything about.
Well, that's the old adage, there are no solutions, only trade-offs. And it's like you're introducing new problems and by solving others. It's just this cat and mouse sort of thing. And new technology coming in, it's like, yes, now I've solved for this. And like, the grandparent analogy, this is sort of like, no, I'll just stick to my SMS text messaging. I can message you, it works, and you understand that I'm going to just respond to a text or phone call or whatever.
And that's what I'm going to do.
No, that's it. That's the right criteria. It's also seeing industrial plants, like on the old coax cable running at 1 megabit per second. And people are like, wow, that's really slow. And you're like, no, that's all it needs. So that life cycle is just going to take a lot longer. I mean, we haven't solved for that. I don't see us updating PLCs every 5 years. It brings too many risks with it.
Well, and again, but why? So it's not the model that America, especially America, does. Like we're this consumption, capitalistic economy where we throw everything away. We buy something new. I have to get on to my kids and my wife and myself, because it's very easy to just say, oh, I'll just go buy another one. Right. When, again, 10 years ago, we didn't have Amazon. I couldn't order something and have it show up same day. Sometimes where I live, I can order something and literally that afternoon, a freaking driver brings it to my house in a box, right? Used to, you'd have to get in your car, you'd drive, and especially if you lived out in the country, that could be a 2-hour long thing just to drive into town, get something and come back. So you were really intentional about when you did those things. And if you could fix it without having to go to town or buy a new thing, that's what you're going to do, right? That's the reason why people had old trucks and they drove them until forever, and they handed them down to their kids and their grandkids and all that kind of stuff. Like, how many people have a car that they've lasted more than 3 years? In the States, it doesn't happen very often anymore. I just bought my son, he just turned 16. We bought him a 2004 Lexus GX 470. So it's like the Forerunner or whatever, but the Lexus version. It's got 272,000 miles on it, but that thing will run for 500, 600,000 miles if it's taken care of, and it's in good shape. Right. So
Yeah, and it's like it's fit for purpose for him, and low cost to entry for him as well.
Exactly. He saved up money. He worked all summer. He's a lifeguard, and he saved up money. He bought that car. I mean, I had to help him a little bit because it was a little bit more expensive than he intended, but still, 90% of the money came from him, and he worked for it. So he's super proud of it, and it's a great vehicle for him, right? But it's not a brand new whatever. But at the same time, that car will probably outlast any brand new car we bought him if we were going to buy him a brand new thing, because it probably would have fallen apart in the next 2 years.
Yeah, like computer software updates over the air, and it gets bricked, and there's again, like say, there's some great benefits from it, but there's also risk involved, and the good years of like 2004, like any mechanic could probably fix it. Well, they're gone. You have to get the old vendor plug-in, and yeah. So much like that in an industrial space, they've tried to go down and box you in, so you have to do things their way. Otherwise, you're non-compliant and your warranty's gone. And it's infuriating, but we're never going to get away from it.
That's one of the big things that I always hear as well. And again, working in the plants, I understood it. If I make changes to those switches, you talked about, a lot of times the vendors will bring in, let's say a Cisco switch, 2960, an old switch, 2960S. And those switches are still running in a lot of places. I've got some here in my lab, actually. It's a Cisco switch. It's the same thing you'd see in an IT world, in a business environment, in a data center. It's the same Cisco iOS. There's nothing proprietary about it. It's just Cisco. But if I change that configuration to something that the vendor doesn't support and it breaks it, the vendor won't support the process because you changed the configuration. So it's like, good luck. Like, they're not going to not support it. They're not going to tell you that you can't use it, but they're going to say it's up to you to fix it because you changed our configuration. If you want to put it back to it's kind of like if you put, you buy a brand new car and you throw a supercharger on it and you take it to the dealership because the engine blew. They're like, yeah, sorry, buddy, that's you.
Yep. Yeah. It's unfortunate, but that's where we're at. And, there's been, I've done assessments. I've gone, hey, Honeywell, can I make these changes? And they're like, we've got to go to global. And about 4 to 8 months later, they come back and they're like, yep, you can do those changes. We're happy with that. It's like, excellent. That took a while, but at least you got something. And then there's other vendors that are like, no, you cannot touch our switches and everything has to be completely flat and also I've found with these warranty contracts, with particular vendors too, that the understanding can be quite confusing because you put in a look at a new DCS system, and we won't name names, but
sure.
Put in a new DCS system and new cybersecurity stuff. We've got logging, we've got decent remote access, we've got, endpoint agents, and we're going to do application and allow listing. Like, okay, cool. this is all good. Come back 8 months later, and the control system engineer from the vendor is like, I can't get this thing to work. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I've had to rebuild this machine like 6 or 7 times. And I'm like, well, what are you doing? And he's like, well, look, I update the screen. I update the image, but I'm also updating these files. I was like, have you updated the application allow listing server to say that those executables for the DCS are safe? He's like, what's application allow listing? Like, so you take him over and then it just works. And so again, disconnect between the cybersecurity and maintaining the warranty. Some of the vendors are actually not really training their staff on the new stuff that they need to support as well. And having talked to those vendors, control system engineers, they're like, we're controls guys. We don't want to do that. We don't want to look after Active Directory. Give that to somebody else. But then the vendor company says, you're not allowed to look after Active Directory. We have to. So you're like stuck in limbo.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it goes back to that gray area where, the systems engineers, the control vendors that they come out, they're controls people. And maybe they have some experience or they got some training at the thing, at Active Directory or switching, but usually they're running a script. Again, that's what happened in the example I gave last time about Active Directory. It was a control system person, and she wasn't a technologist. She followed the script, and when it didn't work, she did what the script told her to do, and she broke everything. Again, she wasn't doing it maliciously. It wasn't a bad actor. She just made a mistake. Anybody could do it. I've made lots of mistakes like that, but I've also done it enough times. I knew why it was a problem, and I wouldn't do that in a production environment. Right. But that's what happens in these spaces. And because they don't truly understand what they're doing, it's like, you took your car to your plumber, and he's pretty handy. Maybe he can fix it, but he's not a mechanic. So if he puts in the wrong part or he breaks something, is it really a surprise when you took your car to your plumber? Like, take it to a mechanic. If you want it to be done right, it's going to be more expensive, but it's going to be worth it.
Yeah. Yes. And that's that biggest problem that we have, I think, in industry, is actually showing the value, like communicating the value. They're like, no, you can't just send your mechanic to plumber to go fix a car. You actually need the correct skill set, and trying to explain that to a business and show it in a business risk format in a way that you can get buy-in and say, look, your business requirements say you need to accomplish X. We're facilitating that. Here's your strategy. Here's your roadmap. And we're going to do that with this technology, with this process, and with these people. It's very, very hard to get that structure in place and to show that value. I mean, we tried, but generally, like most things, not even a cybersecurity thing, just trying to get, like at a water treatment facility, having 2 OPC servers, because, redundancy is nice. And they're like, no, we don't want to spend the extra like $2,000. And you're like, well, it's $2,000. Like, we're not talking about a boatload of money here, and engineering effort's going to be the same. And they're like, no. And then they have a plant outage, and the OPC server, they can handle like 50 minutes, half an hour, 2 hours. But soon you're going to hit that time window where it's like, well, we don't know what our plant's actually doing. It's controlling, it's working. We've got no idea what it's doing. So we're going to have to hit that big old e-stop for the entire plant. And you're like, all this could have been saved if you spent
by $2,000.
Yeah. So, and we're having that problem with cybersecurity as well. It's like, look, the value's here, but trying to get that through is still, I think, going to take time. That awareness hasn't permeated through. We're slowly getting secure by design, which is nice as well. But yeah, I see it as the biggest problem we have to tackle, is trying to demonstrate to business leaders why you do the things that you do. Regulation certainly helps. It really does help. I think it seems to be the biggest thing to get them on the radar. But aside from that, if you don't have it, like New Zealand doesn't have a lot of regulation around OT cybersecurity or critical infrastructure, and you can see that it's definitely not a priority for them. So that
it's hard, again, I came from power utility, and I think that's why, 17 critical infrastructures in the United States, and power utility is the most advanced, and oil and gas is right behind it, just because oil and gas, there are regulations there, but they also have the most funding. So, power utility just is that way because they have to be. And oil and gas is that way because they have the money, and it's a big enough risk that they don't want to go down because they lose huge amounts of money. So they put their money in it. But to your point, wastewater, they're going to not choose a $2,000 option because maybe they don't have $2,000. It's rolling that dice, hoping it doesn't happen. It's not changing your oil in your car. It's worked so far for 100,000 miles. I've never changed my oil. So I guess you don't have to change your oil, right?
Yep.
Until you do.
That's it. It's always when there's an impact, suddenly there's
right.
cash.
Yeah.
And that, I remember a community event, one of our very first ones in New Zealand, and one gentleman, he goes, look, this is all well and good for you guys because you've all been impacted. You've all had something happen. He goes, how do I, who've never had an impact, get OT security funding? And everyone just went, crickets. It's like, well, until something happens, nobody really wants to deal with it. So it sounds
like we need to start up a new business that we go and just lightly attack people so they can have justification. And I'm completely kidding, by the way, just to make sure everybody hears this. I am kidding. I don't actually think that we should do that, but you're right. Like it's always like, it's never happened to me. It's never happened to me. Why should I spend money on this? Like cause this money could go, when I first started this, we were literally taking budget out of, plant management, like plant maintenance during an outage. So they didn't do boiler tube, replacement because I had to take $200,000 out of that budget, and they turned off one thing they were doing and gave me the money because they only had a finite amount. Like it's not like they printed money on trees.
Yeah, a lot of some of the stuff I put in was, like cheap and effective. Upgraded SCADA system. There's some spare servers, some spare workstations, slap the network card in there. PF Sense, you've now got firewall. There's remote access in there. We can lock down the ports. You can now access like rockwellautomation.com to get your user manuals. Okay, it's not. Some people were like, oh no, you don't want internet activity. It's like, well, giving the engineers stuff they need. Kind of helps.
Yeah, it does.
But, it's like, again, risk conversation. It's like, well, they're happy with that. So those types of things, really help. And like logging servers, there's free logging servers and NASs, and you just sort of like make do with what you got. So generally, that's how I start when I do assessments. It's like, what are the tactical quick wins, and what have you already got that's underutilized? Because we're forever hearing, even in the IT thing, it's like, oh, we installed CrowdStrike everywhere. Everything's amazing. It's like, anyone looking at it? Anyone actually configured some of these things? And they're like, oh, there's this one guy, Jeff, I think. And you're like, okay, good luck, Jeff.
Yeah. Hope Jeff doesn't get hit by a bus.
Yep. So, yeah, there's plenty of opportunities to, uplift OT cybersecurity using underutilized stuff, like even turning on, like, provided your vendor lets you, like Radius or TACAX on your network switches, can solve a lot of problems from a
setting up logging, sending those logs from those switches. I can't tell you how many times, and that's the other piece to this that I say, and then we'll kind of wrap this up. But I say this all the time, like the cybersecurity thing. When I was pitching this in the beginning, I never pitched it as cybersecurity because nobody'd heard what it was. Nobody knew what it was. Nobody cared. I would pitch it to my plant managers of, I can get you more visibility. I can make your system more reliable. So one of the first sites we did, we turned on logging, just like you said, and they had a fully redundant system. The control system had, every switch was redundant. They had redundant paths to everything. They thought there was a switch that was sitting in the control room or in the electronics room, and it had basically powered itself down. And nobody knew about it, right? It was just sitting in a cabinet, and it's so loud in there you can't hear it. It was beeping, but you can't. There's blinky lights and noise and all the things you can't usually have PPE in, anyways. Like there's just so much going on, you don't know it's there. We turned on logging and all this stuff, and within 5 minutes we started getting this. It rose to the top really quickly, and we saw this switch was complaining. Basically, we walked over to the switch. And it had shut itself down for heat issues. Like it wasn't able to cool itself. It was saying fan failure. So we walk up to the switch. We looked at the back of the switch, and there was a zip tie that was in the fan shroud and was stopping the fan from being able to spin. I pulled the zip tie out. The fan started spinning. It booted up, and now you had redundancy. So this was one of their core switches. It was one of a redundant pair. So they didn't have an outage because it was a redundant and the other one was doing the load. But if anything had happened to that other switch, they had a false sense of security because they thought they had a redundancy, but they didn't. And they didn't know about it. And who knows how long it had been doing that. We found it in 5 minutes and fixed it. And I went to the plant manager and said, this is why we do it. We're doing this, right? It's not for cybersecurity. Those things are good. I see those as bolt-ons. If we can have these conversations of making these things more reliable, more resilient, more redundant, more capable and available, and I can get more data to my engineers, I can make them more efficient, they can get their manuals online, like all that type of stuff. That's the conversation we'd have. And oh, by the way, I'll also make it more secure.
Yeah, while you're there, it's just
right.
Yeah,
it's a byproduct.
Well, yeah, very similar story. Not cable time and the fan, but that sort of that realizing, getting some logs, getting some visibility. I've been doing this for like 8, 9, 10, 11. It was like, okay, we've got an OPC server. That OPC server has SNMP functionality. How about
screwing out my problem?
grab the via SNMP, grab the switch details and see where we're at. And you're going to get more visibility from that and actually put it onto the SCADA screen. And soon the operators realized they could find the page and they're like, that's weird, that port's down. No wonder I'm having issues. And then, just giving them that thing, the fault diagnosis just really helps. And then it became standard to have network switches with management interfaces so you could hold them for data and put that on the SCADA screen. Was just like, okay, well, this is great. Again, not a cybersecurity thing. It was just like, give it visibility.
Because it's part of the system. It's part of because if you take that network switch out, so prime example here, guys, and we're going to, this is the meat for me, the meat of this conversation. That Cisco switch, that Active Directory server, the system cannot function without it. That the network, it goes across that network traffic, it goes across that route. So if I take those root switches out, the control system dies. Now, a lot of times the plant will continue to run because the PLCs are hardwired and all that stuff. It'll just continue to run. But what happens in that place when an operator can't control the system? They hit that big red button like you talked about and they punch it out because they can't control it. They can't see what's going on. So obviously they need to shut it down because it could something bad could happen and we don't want that, right? So looking at a Cisco switch is an OT device if it is in an OT system. An Active Directory is an OT system if it is serving an OT function. Like that is the moral of this story. So stop arguing about is it an OT attack or an IT attack and look at what function it's serving because that's what matters.
That's it. That's all it is. I completely agree with that.
So all this to say, let's wrap up with my favorite question. I did prep you about it a little bit, but next 5 to 10 years, what's something coming over the horizon that's exciting and maybe something that's concerning that you see that could be, impacting us in these the things that we were talking about today, or something completely off the shelf. It completely up to you.
One of it's both the concerning and the winning at the same time. I've been noticing for a while now, OPC UA is finally getting some uptick. OPC UA and MQTT. And a lot of vendors now, they're like, no, you don't have the option of doing plain text. By default, now that you've installed an OPC UA server, you are doing a certificate. We've got one self-signed, or you can do your own, So that's good in the sense that PLCs have OPC UA servers in them now. So it is no longer let's have a proprietary thing. And from a monitoring point of view, well, what connects? If you imagine you had OPC UA is your visibility, it goes to your plant screens, it goes to the historian server, collects the data. Cool. Well, then what's going to use the native protocol for Modbus TCP? Let's say it's a Schneider Modicon. Okay, so Modbus TCP, PLC to PLC comms. Yep. Engineering. Okay. So if you ever see an out of band Modbus TCP com, it now makes it easier to sort of diagnose because you've sort of got a separation of protocols there. So that's nice. And there's a lot more advanced stuff in OPC UA on a PLC that I'm genuinely excited about, some security features, but it all hinders on the certificate stuff. And what scares me is I've seen this a few times now where they're like, we'll go self-sign because we don't want to do PKI and properly in OT because it's a massive dependency, and it is. Yeah. It really is. You've really got to get that down right. but then they just sort of go, okay, cool, we've installed it. And you're like, well, what's the lifetime of the certificates? And they're like, what? It's surely it's like 20 years. It's like, you don't know. When was the first time you installed this and enabled this technology? 7 years ago. So it's like, well,
it's a ticking time bomb that you don't know when it's going to go off.
It's basic asset management, but I just see people not really sort of going into that level and going, actually, we need to take care of this. So OT PKI, very, very complex problem. A lot of infrastructure has to go in place to support that if you were to run it. But the disadvantages of going with like a self-signed is that it's not being managed, and therefore there's no automatic renewal. There's no, like, let's just, if it's compromised, we're going to have to reissue all the certificates. There's a lot of downfalls as there is windfalls from it. So I'm glad that we're going down a vendor neutral path and people can talk on the same protocol. Like MQTT seems to be everywhere, same with OPC UA. But at the same time, there's a lot of complexity now. Going right back to the start, well, not the very start, but there are only trade-offs, no solutions. So
right.
You've solved for problem, but you've introduced some more. So anyway, that's
the moral of that story to me is that, and it gets back to every assessment I think I've ever done, or every time I've walked into a place and trying to figure out what's going on. Most of the time it starts out with, what do I have? And understanding from an asset inventory, from a network architecture, from a system design, from a how everything functions, and do they have one control vendor or two or 5 or 12, or, how does everything sit together? And until I really have that good understanding, it's hard for me to make a recommendation on what you need to do. I could tell you how many Windows XP machines need to be patched and how you need to update your firewall, and any asshole can tell you that. That's not the value that I bring. I don't want to talk. I'll talk to your IT guy. I'm going to talk to him for about 5 minutes. I'm going to shoot him out of the room. And then I'm going to talk to your control system engineer and your ICS guys and your operators. Cause that's where I really understand how the system works and which devices are critical and which devices, if they go down, break the stuff. Cause they know which system don't touch, don't breathe on, don't reboot it. Or as soon as there's an issue, they run over to that machine because they know that's the thing that went down. Or they're looking at that screen. Yep, that port went down again. Let's go jiggle that cable because it'll come back online when we jiggle that cable.
Yep, I've definitely seen that. And yeah, there's been a few times where you've done an assessment and the operator or lead guy that's been there for ages, electrician, control system engineer, you're opening up panels and he's like, don't touch that. I was like, well, why is that? And he's like, well, no, I'll use a pen. I'll, safe. Like I know how to do cable tracing. He goes, no, I know. He goes, that thing's temperamental. If you just lightly tap it, it drops the entire rack and then the process has an upset. Okay. So, that critical stuff, they just know how the plant and where the pain points are, and you can get a lot of value when you do those assessments for sure out of that.
All right, so last question. See if it's the same in over in your neck of the woods. In my neck of the woods, especially in power plants and things, when I'm running new things, we don't get in the cable tray. We just add new cables on top. We don't remove any of the existing stuff. We just rewire on top of it. So there's 40, 50, 60, 70 years worth of dead end of life cables that are just sitting there for the exact reason you just said, because they're afraid if I touch anything, it's going to break things that they have no idea where it goes.
Yes. Yeah. No, there's definitely elements of that, to be sure. There's even just like the old server is right next to the new server, and the old server is right next to the old server, and you've got this. And it's like, just in case we lose something, we can go back to the old system.
That guy's still there.
Yeah. You just sit there and go, what system is this? And they're like, DOS, and it's like, wow, we've got a DOS machine. So
it still fires up. We fire it up once a year.
Yeah. And you're like, okay, well, on the plus side, hackers probably don't know how to write exploit code for it anymore. So
exactly. Exactly. All right, man. So how do people get a hold of you? Call to action, anything you want people to know, how to reach out to you, all the good stuff.
Obviously, like I said, name's Gavin Dilworth. I work in New Zealand, although I do consulting globally. And you can reach me at Assessment Plus or on LinkedIn. So yeah, just hit me up if you have any questions on OT cybersecurity. I'm more than happy to help.
Awesome. Hey, man, this was an awesome conversation. I think we could have talked for another couple of hours, like we said in the beginning. Maybe we'll do a round 2 of this in the future and dive into some more. So, but I really appreciate you reaching out. I appreciate you taking time today and kind of sharing your message with the crowd here. And, the whole point, and I think I see it in so many individuals like you and I, is that we just want to get the message out there. We want to help. If you don't choose me, I do consulting, you do consulting. Technically, we're competitors. I don't see us that way. Like, there's plenty of fish in the sea. If I can help you, if you can help me, if I can help people on that, like, that's the reason I do this podcast. It's the reason I speak at conferences, and I'm always willing to answer questions, whether I'm your customer or your vendor or whatever. I don't care. I want to better the world than when I came into it, and anything I could do to help that's what I want to do. So.
I feel the same. Likewise, and thank you for having me. It's been a blast, and there probably will be a 2.0. So
that's right.
Look forward to that.
All right, man. Well, have a good one, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Later, man.
Thanks for joining us on Protect It All, where we explore the crossroads of IT and OT cybersecurity. Remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to stay ahead in this ever-evolving field. Until next time.